love it. I love it. Hi, my friend.
Hi. Hi, Jill. Jill Rose. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so honored. I love talking to you. We were just talking for, I don't know, the past 10 minutes, and we probably just missed out on some really good podcast material because I didn't immediately hit record upon.
I know. We should do that going
starting.
forward. We should just hit record from the second I'm on, because we could talk for decades and then be
Yeah.
like, oh, did we catch any of that?
Yeah. Wait a minute. I forgot to hit record.
Thanks for having me back. I'm like literally just about to stand outside your door and be like, are you ready for me? Can I come back in? Hello.
Yeah. Anytime, Jill.
I love seeing you. Yeah.
Oh, likewise. I was telling you this, but you are often on my mind. I think about, I said this in our first episode. What was that? 80 something. I was just looking at the schedule. It was back in March. We recorded our first episode, and I was just reflecting upon how I met you and those warm fuzzies that I immediately got from you when I met you at the retreat center. And I don't know, there was like, how when you meet certain people, there's like this intrinsic connection.
Yeah, it was magnetic. That was my experience too. Thank you for saying that. But I saw you, and I think I said, like, I made a beeline straight to you. Like, I don't know. Hi, I'm Jill. Can we grow old together? Is that too much? Is that coming on too strong?
No, I want to grow old with people like you.
Yeah, it keeps us living vibrantly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of living vibrantly, and last time we talked about books. So speaking of living vibrantly and our love of books, I have been obsessing over and just leaning into a work that's recently out by Dr. Peter Attia. It's called Outlive.
Outlive. I'm writing it down right now. Okay.
And he's like a trained Western medical doctor, but he's moved away from that modality of treating people and into the realm of like longevity and how do we age to our fullest capacity without chronic disease, without assuming like, oh, cancer's going to kill me. I'm going to get Alzheimer's. I'm going to break a hip and then die a lonely death, Yeah. So, and I think so often I was falling into this trap too for so long, thinking I don't want to, live into my 80s and 90s because I'm terrified of getting Alzheimer's or dementia, because it seems like it runs in my family. I haven't done any genetic testing yet, but it seems like it runs in my family. So I keep saying, and this is terrible. It's like, it's so, I don't know what the word is. I keep saying I'd rather die of cancer sooner than live to an old age and die like an old, chronic, painful, miserable, lonely death, right? And what kind of like,
okay, everything in me is like, don't say that shit out loud. You can't say that. Right? Don't think that. I have to tell you though, I'm interested in reading this, and I'm curious to hear his insight and yours, because I have an interesting take on this. I have to wonder how much, and I'm actually going to even just declare it and rephrase that, which is I believe that attitude is everything. And I think it has to be supported with good choices and healthy living. And of course, but my goodness, think about those people that smoked cigarettes and drank and ate red meat and then like laughed on their deathbed. They're like, ha, 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 a good life, right? And I just have to believe that I just think that joy is such a huge part of that. And my inspiration for that is my vast, experimenting I did with my one grandmother was that my beloved grandmother passed away at 99 and a half. And she, yes, she was just sort of a pioneer in eating organically and vitamins and minerals. And she really was so ahead of her time. And she laughed at everything. And she had so much pain and suffering in her world. And she could spin it and find a good and look for a gift. And I absolutely believe that that is what contributed to her long, vibrant life. And it really wasn't until the end that that her body just was like, all right, sister, like we've been here long enough. It's, it's kind of time, but she was the only medicine she was on were glaucoma eye drops when she passed.
Wow.
And she had all of her tips and tricks, which would crack me up. And I would always get articles in the mail, and she'd always say, like, have you tried emu oil? And and I remember I was there when she passed, and the man from hospice was helping her, and he was like, oh, she's got great skin. And I was like, it's the emu oil. Yeah.
What is emu oil? I don't know.
I don't know what it must be oil from an emu. And I'm sorry. I don't even know how they extract it. I don't know the process. I will tell you, she had gorgeous skin. And at 99, literally on her deathbed, the guy was like, she's got really good skin.
Oh my God, I love
and
this story.
She would love that. That would make her crack up. And I think there's everything to be said about, there's so many more toxins and pollutants and stress in our world, at like just crazy epidemic levels. But I also firmly believe that how we move through the world, and if we can do so with joy and with ease and a sense of humor, it's a game changer. That's my belief. I'm going to say it right here on outside the studio.
Thank you for saying it. I appreciate the perspective shift. I appreciate the reframe. I think it's really helpful. I think it's helpful for people to have people like you in our lives that can help us reframe those negative statements, because they can become self-fulfilling prophecies, right? It's so true. Thank you.
And it's easy to have those statements too, right? I mean, we are inundated with so much around us, right? As you're saying, like, I have dementia in my family. I see this around me. There are so many examples that it's very, very easy to believe that. And so it is an intentional mind shift. And perhaps it's naive, and perhaps it's even denial at times. I'm going to reframe the denial too.
Thank you.
And say, no, it's a higher knowing. But I just believe that attitude is as pervasive, if not more, than the messaging we have around us.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree. I think that's what I love about this book, Outlive. This is the last thing I'll say about it, and then we can move on, is that's his whole point, is we don't have to succumb to chronic disease. We can live our lives into our 90s. Even he does a study on centenarians, and the key differentiators between those folks that make it to that age chronic disease free and retain their mobility, retain their independence, retain their agility, their vibrancy of life. Like, I mean, I think that's one of the things, is that attitude. He does go into a study where I'm not going to reveal too much, but it's like they did conversations with these centenarians, and they're like, what do you attribute your long life to? And they'll say, oh, I had bacon every day. Oh, my whiskey and cigar. And maybe they're joking. Who knows? I don't know. But there is something to be said for like a lightheartedness and an approach, where a willingness to laugh at life, that, and
quality, right? A quality of life, even if you're like, oh my God, you're like a heart attack waiting to happen, but it's quality. I think we miss the importance of that. And I also think we spend so much time trying to recapture our youth that we lose sight of how beautiful aging is, all the gifts that come with it. I mean, I guess that's a whole other podcast I'll be showing up on your doorstep for.
Well,
but
why don't we talk about that though? Because I think do you do this work with women, the return, or what is it? It's like the embracing the innocence of your childhood, the inviting in of the holding with loving kindness your childlike self.
Yes. I am a huge proponent of that work. I think, and you're probably speaking to like a little bit of internal family systems and things like that. Yeah. It feels super intuitive to me to take people back, the women I work with, back to that place of joy and fun in their life before life got on them. right? Like until, and we know this, and I think we've laughed about this, like the koshas, that the concept in yoga, which I think that I've given my own meaning to. I sort of was like, I'm going to tailor this to how I want to see it.
Yeah. What's Jill's meaning for the koshas? Tell us.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll show up in the Bhagavad Gita at some point, or,
Yeah.
But I love this. And I base my practice and my life and my life view on this, which is we are all born perfect. I find it so hopeful and so optimistic and truthful that we are all born perfect and we have this light within us, and it just gets covered, right, as with these layers of conditioning, whether that is trauma or grief or expectation or culture or responsibility, right? And so this light just gets covered and it gets buried underneath these layers until we don't recognize the light anymore. And I see that as one of the practices of yoga is helping like strip those layers so that we can do a little excavation. And I think in my work with women, it just makes perfect sense to me to take them back into time where who were you before life got in the way? Because that part of you, that part of that joy and that fun and the things you could get lost in for hours on end, that part holds all the clues to the joy and the happiness you are seeking in your life.
Yeah. So how do you, in that perspective, I think where I go with that, and I tend to get stuck in the loss of that innocence. And I think about how easy it was for me as a small child to create a story, to read a book and be like, I could see how this is written. I can see and believe that I could create something like this of myself, for, to share it with those around me. And so I was always writing stories. I was always imagining things. And there's this sense of loss that I want to get back to, that I know is still there, but it's covered by my jaded adult self. And so
that's one way to phrase it.
Right?
Yeah.
How do we honor that, bring it back into our lives, but not get stuck in the loss of innocence, and also, maybe move forward into who we are now and honor that, who we are now?
That is such a beautiful question. And you offered so much beautiful insight into that. The first thing that jumps out at me is, so there's already this part of you that knew that you could get lost in the writing and the reading. And it is a connecting point for us, the books, right? Like you go there. So, I can't tell you what that means. I can't say, oh, you're going to be an author but what I can say is there's something very meaningful to you around that process. And that's a huge breadcrumb that is worth investigating, worth following. And the process of following that breadcrumb has to be a process of grace for self, right? Jaded, it's an interesting word because I just always want to encourage my clients and my friends to know that the reason that we pulled away from that part of us that knew to read, that loved to read and write, right? That part of us that knew joy in our own personal expression is not our fault. It's just being a product of the culture with which we live in, and so it's not something to shame ourselves around or feel bad. It is what it is. We just, whether we live in, the United States in this developing world, or we live, in the jungles of the Amazon, or in the, buildings in Russia, like who knows, right? We all have some form of conditioning that has been layered upon us. And that's just a byproduct of being a human, right? And having these developed brains that recognize shame and fear and all that stuff. So I would offer grace around that. And maybe we can replace the shame of it with curiosity. So more like, rather than, oh, I wish, the longing to not be able to read and write anymore. What was it that brought me joy? Like, what was it specifically that I found in those moments of reading and writing? And And I would say that you really have, that has emerged in a lot of the work that you do, right? I mean, having a podcast and putting yourself out in a world where you have to articulate, writing curriculum for teacher trainings. Like there is a lot that goes into that, a lot of intention, a lot of thoughtfulness, a lot of creativity and innovation. And it might not look in the like how you think it should, but it's certainly surfacing in different ways. So perhaps looking at it with a reframe again. And I do want to say too that it's way easier for somebody on the outside to see that, right? Like we're always stuck in our own way and we can only see as far as our nose. And so it is really helpful to have somebody be like, actually, look at all the ways that you parlay that gift into other things that you do that you might not even know. And so those are breadcrumbs to follow.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for my own personal life coaching session. Jill.
You're like, what did I sign up for here? Oh dear.
Thank you everyone for listening to me get my
Do you want to get on the
coaching
couch?
Yeah, I do actually. I like a warm cup of tea. And I'd like to lay down on the couch.
Yeah, that's fine. We can turn the camera off. I got you, girl. No, but I think it's I think you make such a good point. Like, I mean, one, how do we even know who we were when we were younger? And then if we have a glimpse of it, how do we even activate her again? And then if we even think about contemplating activating her, all that shame rises up. Like, why didn't we do this sooner? And why did it, I mean, I think you're just speaking to what most of us, especially as women, encounter, right? And it's not as simple as like, just shift your mindset and that toxic positivity. Like it's not that, but it is worth considering a larger perspective, which is, actually, I do call on this in different areas of my life. I never considered that. And if we can invite, maybe we don't even believe it, but we can fake it till we make it, inviting curiosity. Maybe it helps to build a pathway there that becomes more accessible for us and becomes the more well-worn path versus the way that we were looking at things historically that didn't serve us as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Another great reframe of recognizing all the ways that creativity, that ability to create, in the form of writing or the spoken word, story and conversation.
Yeah.
In what I do, because you're right, it's there. You're right. I wanted to, this brings up that something that's been on my mind a lot lately, as I just read Shoe Dog. I don't know if you read this book, but since the Air came out this year, 2023,
yes,
the story of Michael Jordan and Nike.
Yeah.
I felt, and also in October, so we're pre-recording this content, y'all. So I'm training right now for the October marathon in Portland, Oregon. And by the time you listen to this, I will have completed it. So I'm thinking a lot about running and why I do it. This will be my third marathon.
Oh my gosh.
And the reason that I decided to do this marathon is multifaceted. We can talk about it if it's interesting, but the thing that I want to talk about right now is something that was very present in the book Shoe Dog. And that is, we're talking to it, right? It's like the people that are born, you kind of spoke to this a little bit, the people that are kind of born or in adolescence or at a young age really have this intrinsic motivator. Like they have this purpose, they have this calling, and they can't even really question it because it's like this thing that propels them forward to create something like Nike, which if you've read Shoe Dog, you know that it seems like Phil Knight just like this thing was born out of him. It wasn't like somebody was like, hey, you need to create this amazing brand. And so there's this little paragraph in here that I wanted to share, and then we can just discuss this idea of purpose. I'm thinking about it from the lens of people like us who work with entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, you, Jill, in your work with women specifically, me and my work with yoga practitioners and people who are just, I don't know, maybe thinking about doing something outside of the box. Certainly in our day and age, young people have so much more creative outlets in terms of like what their career, their life, their path
freedom.
could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here is the passage, and then,
okay,
then I'll
great.
stop talking. So this is on page 381. It's all the same drive, the same dream. It would be nice to help them avoid the typical discouragements. And here he's talking to young people, sharing with his motivation. He says, I tell them to hit pause, think long and hard about how they want to spend their time and with whom they want to spend it for the next 40 years. I'd tell men and women in their mid-20s not to settle for a job or a profession or even a career, but seek a calling. Even if you don't know what that means, seek it. If you're following your calling, the fatigue will be easier to bear. The disappointments will be fuel. The highs will be like nothing you've ever felt. I'd like to warn the best of them, the iconoclasts, the innovators, the rebels, that they will always have a bullseye on their back. The better they get, the bigger the bullseye. It's not one man's opinion, it's a law of nature. I'd like to remind them that America isn't the entrepreneurial Shangri-La people think. Free enterprise always irritates the kinds of trolls who live to block, to thwart, to say no, sorry, no. And it's always been this way. Entrepreneurs have always been outgunned, outnumbered. They've always fought uphill, and the hill has never been steeper. America is becoming less entrepreneurial, not more. A Harvard Business School study recently ranked all the countries of the world in terms of their entrepreneurial spirit. America ranked behind Peru. And those who urge entrepreneurs to never give up, charlatans. Sometimes you have to give up. Sometimes knowing when to give up, when to try something else is genius. Giving up doesn't mean stopping. Don't ever stop. I could go on. I could just read this whole chapter.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Right? Do you see? I keep going. I keep opening this page and I'm like, okay, so what is my calling? What is my calling? What is my purpose?
I think, wow, I think there are so many brilliant nuggets in that. I think one is it's really easy to say my purpose looks like the level of Phil Knight, you know, and so that in and of itself can be really intimidating. We're not all going to end up having a $900 billion company. I just saw Air, so I know that. We're not all going to have that, but it's not my calling to bring. I don't even know the mission statement of it, but it's not, shoes and whatever that expression of shoes are is not my calling. I do want to say, I am so impressed and in awe of you. 3 marathons. That's incredible. And I don't want to bypass that because it's a huge achievement and takes a ton of commitment. And I will drive to the sidelines with Gatorade, but holy cow, that's as close as you're going to get me. So I want to shout you out. That's really cool and impressive. And I'm so excited for you.
Thank you.
And with that, I think it's just important to remember that purpose shows up, calling shows up in a myriad of ways, right? We're not all going to be Phil Knights. We're not all going to be gifted yoga instructors and certifiers. We're not all going to be life coaches for women, right? We have our own expression. And I have to believe that when we fall in line with our calling, that expression, however it may be, isn't less or more than anybody else's. It just is. And it's perfectly aligned with us. And when we put them all together, they fit seamlessly together. However, the friction that he's speaking of is, I think, the people who are casting stones, the people who won't, who sit up in the stands and throw things versus getting into the arena themselves, as Brené Brown says, is fear, right? And so they haven't figured out their calling yet. They don't know what it is. They have one, but they're so stuck in their ways that their anger and frustration with that is being cast toward the people who are actually pursuing it. And we certainly have a very fear-based society right now. I will say, and I don't know the statistics, but I know that women who are offered, I think we're offered like 8% of VC funding that's out there. We have such a small seat at the table, but women are phenomenal entrepreneurs. We have a track record of more sustainable, more giving, more thoughtful, more creative businesses. And I know I'm making all kinds of large statements today, but we have very little, very disproportionate access to the funds to get there. So I think part of equalizing that is allowing more women to the table and people of color, and we will see that equalize a little bit more. And then in terms to the question of calling, I think it's following the breadcrumbs, following the sweetness. There's something like for you specifically, there's something about the reading and the writing, and who knows what it means, but that was something that lit you up then, and following a little bit more, looking into that. For me, I had no idea what my calling was. I mean, I thought, I was in interior design. I was like, that's great. It's so fun. And I love that. But the truth is, what I loved most about it, I mean, I loved the color and, the artistic part of it. I loved creating places for women. I loved it. That would be like when I look back and go, what were my favorite rooms I designed? Oh my gosh, this sanctuary for this woman. Like it was a language, right? I wanted to lift her and nurture her. And I wanted to like sit down and I wanted to hear about everything. And so it was packaged in interior design. But the truth is, what I was really doing was coaching, in a really beautiful space. And so I think that there are different languages to express our calling, and maybe there are clues to our childhood, I guess, to circle back to that original thing. I think there are those clues that we had as children, and going back and finding those and recognizing that it's probably surfaced in a ton of different iterations, and you can probably connect the dots, and those dots will become a destination at some point.
I love the image of following breadcrumbs too, because that activates my just like, the fairy tale story about the magical, wonderful outcome. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my vibe right there. You're speaking my language.
Yeah.
I think this is a really good segue though to the topic that I know you and I both are familiar with. It's work that I just recently started to do. Man, I wish I would have done this way sooner in my career as an entrepreneur, but it's the idea for those of us that are already on the path of entrepreneurship, or if we're thinking about it or we're starting it, the developing of the ideal client avatar.
Yeah.
And what that work is, why it's important to do it, what kind of resources you found helpful to dig in and do that work. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I love how you used avatar. I haven't heard that before. And when you had said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like the perfect word for it.
What
I just, like my ideal client.
Oh, okay.
Who's my gal, I was like, avatar, that's very cool. Yeah, I have a lot to say about this.
Let's say it.
You're like, all right, here we go. Get comfortable. I think that the ideal client profile has to be rooted in an abundance mindset, meaning that we have to be willing to let go of people that don't fit it, trusting that the right person emerges. And so for me, how I came to find mine was I cast a really wide net. I mean, when I first opened my practice, I was like, yeah, I'll take your dog. Sure, I'll take your dentist. I'll take that. I mean, I was like, sure, because I was just like, your neighbor's cousin's mechanic? Got it. Like, I was like, sure, I'll take everybody. And slowly I was like, all right, well, like, this isn't doing it for me. Yeah. And what I sort of backed my way into that ideal client. And so I looked at like my client roster, right? And so this was super helpful. And if you don't yet have a client roster, there's still a way to do this, but I'll share how I did it, which was I looked at the client roster, and I want to be really clear. Everybody, I've been really fortunate. Everybody that I work with is really, really lovely. They are not a perfect fit for me. And nor am I for them. I do believe it's a very symbiotic relationship, right? So if it's not good for me, it's not going to be good for them either. But what I came to find was when I looked through this roster of clients, I looked at the ones that I really loved. I looked forward to them. It felt aligned. And I diagnosed it like, what is it that I love about this person? What do I feel with it? Why, and I sort of picked it apart and got some information around what it is in this particular dynamic that really lit me up. And then I did that, the other end of like, gosh, where are the ones that I don't feel so light up? And I would go through those clients. And again, it's not personal to them. It's more of an energetic, a dynamic. What I found is that I'm not as good with children and men. I mean, I love men. I love children. It's not my sweet spot. And my talents and skills are not best used there. And so I went back through and was like, gosh, like I love these kids and I love these families. And but it doesn't light me up. And I had to pay attention to that. And I had to learn to say no. So I think it helped to gain some clarity on the areas that did light me up and really draw out, like an avatar, a persona of the women that really do light me up. And then I had to, take a leap of faith and trust that that woman would show up. And that saying no to the income and to the experience of having people who don't fit that, being able to say no to that would free me up for more space for the ideal client. And I have found that to be true. So I think clarity on my vision of who that person is has been instrumental in my business and has been a game changer. Oh. And then it allows me to show up in my best way, right? Like I get to be me in my fullest, goofiest expression. And then it's word of mouth, right? Like if that is a felt energy that resonates with me, it's going to resonate with them. And they're going to go and say, oh my gosh, I spoke to Jill around this, or hey, here's her card. So I've really built my practice around word of mouth. Once I was able to identify my sweet spot, what lights me up.
I love that. I mean, to me, that sounds ideal, right? Because spending time on Instagram, promoting on the socials is such a drain. I think I know I'm not alone in this, right?
Oh, it kills me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't think that, I mean, I am not a business coach. I cannot speak to that, but I can say that I think authenticity, genuine energy far outweighs volume in marketing, social media presence, all of that kind of stuff. I think that it's a very felt energy. And I mean, we know that, right? Like when you're with somebody, you can feel if it's an aligned energy, if it feels genuine, or if it feels alternatively contrived, right? It doesn't resonate in the same way. And everybody has their own expression, so what works for me and how I works for others in differently than it would for others. And I think that's the abundance piece to that. Like there's enough for everybody. And so don't fear the lack, the scarcity point of view.
Yeah. It's such a nice reminder. I remember feeling like that when I graduated from yoga teacher training. And this is, pre-pandemic when there were yoga studios, multiple on every block. And it was like this the idea that the market is oversaturated with yoga teachers, that we couldn't make a living doing this, that there wouldn't be space for us, was not true. That was not my experience at all. I could have, and I did to some extent, kind of work myself into the ground a little bit when I first started teaching, because every opportunity that came my way, I was like, yes, 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 yes. And that wasn't sustainable either. But if I had,
but it's how right? Like that's your casting the wide net. And it's how you kind of back into what you do know feels good.
Yeah. I love that. Well, and also, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, what drew you to yoga teacher training?
Well, it seemed like something that the universe kept throwing my way. And for many, many years, I thought about it and kind of ignored it and didn't sign up. I was really, really close in my early 20s to doing a teacher training in Hawaii. I was still in college. The studio that I was practicing at then, this is back in 2001, wanted to sponsor me to go to this teacher training. And I couldn't, I just wasn't in the mental mindset. There was something about it to me that was really scary. And so I didn't do it. And then I just kept, I've always had my own practice, right? So I wanted, it felt almost like selfish. I was like, I want this practice for me. I think there was a concern that doing the thing, I know I'm not alone in this either, doing the thing that you love, changing that from not a hobby, but like the thing that brings you joy, that allows you to kind of check out from the world, that's like medicine for you. If you make that your career, it shifts from joy and pleasure to work, right? That mindset of I can't have it both ways. That was very much alive in me. And so I realized as I went down the path of the corporate world, I was an executive assistant for so many different industries. I worked in venture capital. I worked for law firms. I worked in healthcare. I worked for the high-tech startup scene in Silicon Valley. I realized that that wasn't the answer either. That, you know, I'm going to show up and regardless of the industry, regardless of the boss, regardless of the work environment, if I'm not doing the thing that I love, there's always going to be this. And even when I am doing the thing that I love for a living, there's always going to be those days where it feels like a slog, where it feels like work, where there's the administrative aspect to the entrepreneurial life that I still do myself, that sometimes I don't want to do it, but it's like I show up because this content is valuable to me and I want to share it out with the world. Teaching yoga, I was always bringing people to class with me. I felt like if I can feel this good, everybody else should feel this good. I just wanted to share it innately. And maybe that's what other studios or teachers that I were practicing with saw when they were like, hey, Tessa, you should become a teacher. So it felt like it was this thing that people around me saw in me that I was unwilling to embrace just yet in my early 20s. And so in 2015, I did my first teacher training. At that point in my life, again, somebody else at a yoga studio was like, Tessa, you should be a teacher. I was like, fine. I kind of was like, oh, okay, gosh, I guess I'll do this thing. Yeah. And I loved it. It changed my life. I do not say that to be glib. I do not say it to sound cliche. It absolutely changed my life. Period. Full stop.
You said so many important things there. I'm like, oh my God, I needed to write it all down. Thank you for sharing that. And that is incredibly beautiful. And I think so important for your listeners. The first is like, if you recall in that paragraph that you read to me that Phil Knight wrote, doing something that you love makes the harder times easier, right? It doesn't take it away. It makes it easier. I can't remember exactly how he articulated that. And I think that's really important. You know, everybody's like, do what you love and you never work a day in your life. And that's not true, right? Like, but it does make it easier when you believe in what you're doing. It makes those hard roads less bumpy, right? So I think that's really important. Two, I love how you said the timing wasn't right. And I'm such a believer in the co-creation of the universe, whether that is universe or God or, you know, whatever you deem that to be in your world. But it's there. It's ready to lay it out for you when you are, and timing is everything. So here you are seemingly with this perfect opportunity to go to Hawaii, no less, and take yoga training. But it wasn't right for you. And it really would have been easy to be like, oh my gosh, I have to take this. This opportunity will never show up again. But you didn't. And instead, you look back to the training that you did take and the things that opened up for you from there. Like, so I think that is a reminder to trust that you're right where you're supposed to be. And if you are, I mean, you know, so much of my work is around this concept of rest and ease, because it's exactly to what you're speaking to. Like, had you done it and driven yourself into that and forced yourself like this square peg into this round hole, it may have paid off, it may not, but you certainly would have missed the lessons on the journey that it's taken to get you here. And those are hugely important to the woman that you are now and the woman that you are continuing to become. And then the last thing I want to say around this, the last of the 94 things I want to say around this is I love that you bring in your friends to it, right? When we love something, when we are passionate about it, when it is purposeful to us, we want everybody to know, right? Like, oh my gosh, I love this so much. This was so transformative to me. This changed my life. I want you to have the same thing. That's a huge sign that you are bumping up against purpose and calling. That you want, it's bigger than you and you want to share it wider than you. Yeah. So those are my thoughts. I thank you for sharing all that. It was really beautiful. And like I said, I was like, oh, wait, and that, and that, and that.
Thank you, Jill. That's really nice to hear. And it's, again, that perspective, that the ability to have these conversations with people like you and to have somebody like you be able to turn it and show me a mirror of what you see is so helpful. That's so valuable.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Yeah. I think it's so easy. Like, I think it's so easy to overlook purpose. And I think, like you were saying, Phil Knight, like he just at 12 years old knew he would be this person. And I think that's fairly unique. I think that's fairly rare. And perhaps we do all feel that, but like we were talking about, enough life has buried that. And sometimes that voice is louder than others. I think for most of us, it's pretty quiet. It gets pretty quiet until there's been some major shift that has forced us to be like, ooh, okay, this is a no turnaround point. It's time to move through that door and not come back through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I wanted to, I know, so since I met you and you started life coaching and working with clients one-on-one, now you're starting to do an online offering, right? Will you tell me about this program you've developed?
Yes, I'm so excited about it. It's called Rest, Restore, and Rise. And it's a 12-week online group coaching program for women. And it's all of this stuff. It'll take women from this place of feeling stuck and burned out and exhausted and all the different ways that stuckness shows up and move them into clarity and confidence and joy and ease and freedom, right? Like rising, this is how I view it. It's just like rising into the woman that they came here to be. And it's so much about what we talked about, right? Like it's all there. We all have all of that perfection. I mean, it like makes me so emotional because I see it every time I'm in front of them. I'm like, oh, girl, you got it. You got it. I see it. Now it's time for you to see it, and that's what this program is about, is like peeling back those layers so that they can get back to who they really, really are and know how to navigate through this world that does throw a lot of layers on us, right? Know how to negotiate with that and do so in a way that they walk out feeling just everything, love and joy and ease and confident, right? We lack so much confidence as women because we don't trust our own instinct and our own voices, and we tend to defer outside. And this course is designed and dedicated, and I am right there with them the whole time to help women believe in themselves again in the way that I believe in them. And yeah. So anyway, I guess I just went way off on that, but it's a 12-week program. And so I still see my clients one-to-one. And this is a different offering where they will receive online modules, and then we'll do like group coaching calls weekly. And there's a bunch of bonuses in there, and people can email me and apply to it. It launches in June, and I'm so pumped for it. And I'm just excited to bring this message. Same way, right? I want all my friends to go to the yoga class. This is my version of it. I want to be able to let every damn woman know that she doesn't have to live in that stuck feeling, that there is joy and ease without guilt and shame, and a life that is so full of love. And the more that we live into our love and our calling, the better we love the people around us. And so I'm so pumped about it.
Well, and I'm curious if this is because this is ongoing, right? So it's,
yeah.
Are you starting cohorts and then that ends and then you start a new cohort? And
yeah, it'll actually kind of be ongoing. So
Mm-hmm.
People have access for 6 months. It's basically 12 weeks of modules, but doing it on their own time, and then jumping into calls. So even if it's going to be really fun, because depending on where people are in the programming, whether they're on week 2 or week 8, they can support one another, and that's really important to me. I think we feel like doing the work of change and development and transformation is hard. It's, I'm going to lay it out there. It's not comfortable work, right? It requires discomfort to move to that next level. And boy, oh boy, if you can do it with other women by your side, it makes it a hell of a lot easier. And so that's my intention behind being able to gather women at all stages too, and be like, oh gosh, I went through that. I experienced that. Here's what how I navigated that, and to lend support. It's sort of gather in the online form, like gathering these women.
Yeah.
Which again, it's kind of always been my jam, is not just helping women individually, but collectively, and then giving them the space, hopefully offering the space where, if wanted, they can help others too. It becomes communal. And that's where the magic is, and that's where growth is, and that's where transformation is, and that's how we get seats at the table, and we shift all of this.
Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to ask you about in terms of offerings is, because I remember seeing this beautiful retreat you put together. I saw it after the fact, so I missed it. I missed the ability to sign up and go. I was curious if you had anything planned for 2024.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start doing these twice a year. Thank you. It was magic. I mean, magic. And so I've decided that I'm going to just put it in my brain. I'm going to do them twice a year. I think I'll do one in October. The way that this one that we just did, and it was on Rest, Restore, and Rise, and it was in Desert Hot Springs outside of Joshua Tree. It just happened so magically. And I just let myself really move intuitively. And I just kind of went with like, oh, that feels good. And I didn't really have an agenda or an outcome, which is a huge difference for me. I am a strategy girl. Like, I like to have my ducks in a row for the most part. And with this, I was like, God, it wasn't that I was winging it. And it wasn't that there wasn't a ton of work behind it, but it was easy. It fell into place so beautifully. So the women, I'd never seen the venue. It turned out to be the most magical oasis. The women that showed up were incredibly magical. The alchemy between all of them, it blew my mind. And it was so, so beautifully easy. And I'm waiting for that hit again. I'm going to set the intention that I want to do twice a year, but I don't want to just try to replicate what I've done in the past. I want it to be new and magical each time. And so I'm going to just wait for inspiration and let that lead me. I'll keep you posted, though.
Okay, please do. Because
thank you for asking.
Jill let her retreat and she didn't invite me. No, but I was looking at the pictures and I was like, oh, this exactly what you're saying. I was like, that looks magical, and I could just imagine myself being in that space with Jill.
Oh my God, it just was so dreamy. And then so many of these women, they'd never met, and we're all in a text thread, and they continue to support and celebrate and share. And hey, I'm going through this. Can you send me some love? And hey, can you celebrate me with this? And now we have this community of 15 women that are so tightly bonded over like great wine and hot springs in California, actually not so great wine, but it was really good. But yeah, so I'm waiting for the inspiration to hit me again. And I've just decided I won't settle for less than that kind of magic.
Cool. Okay, well, keep us posted.
Yes.
And then, as usual, let's hear the best ways to connect with you and
thank you.
Be informed of your offerings. You have a website. You're on the socials. Yes, I know.
The socials. Yes. Yes, I have a website, jillrosecoaching.com. Emailing me at info@jillrosecoaching is always a great way. And then I am on Instagram at jillrosecoaching. And yeah, I mean, right now my energy is moving toward this group online program, and love to, please feel free to reach out, and love to talk to you about it. And if it feels like a good fit, I'd love to have you join. And yeah. And then where did our hour go? I always feel like, okay, can I come back tomorrow?
Yeah.
and then the other tomorrow.
And then the day after, and then
another tomorrow.
I'm sitting here at my desk daily, so you can, because here I am.
I would love that. I love seeing you. Thank you for the time.
Oh, likewise, Jill. It's such a blessing to know you and to be able to connect with you in this way.
Thank you.
I'm grateful
I feel the same way. Me too. I feel the same way. And I wanted to share one last book recommendation.
Oh, please do. Yes.
If you haven't read it, Remarkably Bright Creatures.
Oh, I don't.
Have you read? Oh, Tessa. Oh my God. It's magic. It's actually a magical story. It is, I think it's the best book I read last year.
Really?
Or this year. Yeah. It's about an octopus.
Oh,
have you heard of it?
I haven't read it. No, I haven't read it. But
it's so.
That's why it sounds familiar.
It's just magic. Yeah. It's charming and magical, and these days I don't like to go, dark and sad anymore. So now I'm like, I only like upbeat and try to keep me, at that vibration. And it's just such a charming, wonderful book. So that's my recommendation for you.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad we ended on that, because that feels like our thing. We end on our book recommendations.
I
know.
We
have a book club.
I love that. The Outside the Studio Book Club.
Yeah. Ooh, okay.
I love it. And again, I'm just going to be the Ed McMahon to your Johnny Carson.
Please. I love it. That
reminds me of that somebody's going to,
episode with whose set does what's his name? Kramer find, and he hosts a talk show for a while.
Oh God.
Do you know what episode I'm talking about?
No, I don't, but I can only imagine that. That's got to be hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'll have to find that specific episode.
Yeah, send it to me. That would be hilarious.
It's good. All right, Jill. I'm going to stop us now.
Okay. I love you, girl. Thank you.
Well, everyone, that concludes another amazing episode of Outside the Studio. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something new, maybe remembered something old, maybe felt inspired to apply something to your life. You can hear my dog in the background. She's doing a little happy dance. So Daisy enjoyed it. Anyhow, I wanted to just pop in here to wrap us up to say a couple of things. Number one, I have such an amazing team that helps me put these podcasts together. Without them, I wouldn't be able to bring these amazing conversations to you. So thank you to my producer, my director of creative services, my sound editor, my engineer, Consistency Media. Don't know what I would do without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the amazing creation and artistic, musical genius, Drew Lovern. Thank you so much for putting together this music specifically for Outside the Studio. So unique to the show, only place you're ever going to hear it is right here. Thanks, you guys. You make my world go round. Stay well, everyone. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, share on the socials, especially if it's a show that you think, hey, this could help somebody else. That's what this is all about, right? We're sharing information so that we're better, so that we're inspired, so that we're lifting each other up, and we're learning how to be in this world, living on this planet to the best of our ability, sharing information and inspiring one another. And that's my hope. That's my hope for the show. Take care.